Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? Let's get some reaction from Ross Jackson, our buddy from Locked On Saints and Saints Wire. Ross, appreciate the time as always, man. How are you?
Hey, brother, doing well. Always glad to be here with you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Dude, it's our pleasure. Hey, real quick, before I look ahead, look back, you and I haven't spoken since the draft. Just a quick synopsis, your overall feel of what the Saints did over those 3 days?
Yeah, I like very much what the Saints did in the draft, especially walking away in the first round with Chris Olave, who kind of felt like that kind of top target for them at wide receiver from the very beginning. I think they proved that with the trade up to 11. I know a lot's been made of the amount of selections they gave up to get there, but honestly, it's that whole adage, if you've got a guy, go up and get him, and that's what the New Orleans Saints did. They needed help at wide receiver. They got it. I love the addition of Trevor Penning, getting sort of that mauler guy. I know you've had Elliot Clough on the show before talking a bit about his sort of throw him out the club attitude, which is something that the Saints offensive line can really use after losing Tre'Quan. We'll see how quickly he comes along. And with those remaining defensive selections, it's going to be interesting watching. Alontae Taylor was one that raised a lot of question marks, but now we know that he's going to be competing to potentially start at corner. He'll be a guy that's going to get some good special teams play if he doesn't win that role, of course. And then you have a couple of other guys in what they're calling the Jackson brothers. No relation to myself, of course, but DeMarco and Jordan. Those guys are going to be guys that have good special teams contribution, as well as guys that could actually see some snaps over on the defensive side, with there being some room both at linebacker and on the interior defensive line going in their training camp or mini camps here.
So rookie mini camp starts this weekend, and we're going to see a lot of those guys, even the undrafted guys like Abram Smith, which is kind of the transition to talk about running back, with the Saints saying goodbye to Josh Adams. I mean, Ross, give me some reaction here, considering they worked out Sony Michel, or I didn't work him out. I mean, they tried to, they brought him in for a visit, and he ends up signing with Miami. It would feel as though they're trying to add running back talent. Why say goodbye to Josh Adams today?
I think that perhaps this could be a situation in which bringing in Sony Michel kind of clued to the Saints and Josh Adams that maybe there wasn't necessarily room for him and that he's not the solution for them. I'm speculating in that assessment, but it could simply be that the Josh Adams move was kind of on the way, one way or another, and that they're still looking for some of those other guys that could come in and look at running back. Now, we know the New Orleans Saints well. They bring in guys like Mike Gillislee and Devontae Freeman and, all these veteran running backs every offseason, right? Yeah. Like, they do this all the time. So it's unusual to see them actually parting ways with one. But I'll tell you what, I mean, Abram Smith, the undrafted free agent that they got from Baylor, is the guy that was away from the running back position for 2 years. They moved him at Baylor to linebacker because there was such a need at that position at Baylor. And then they moved him back to running back last year, and he goes off for over 1,600 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns and 257 carries. The kid was incredible. And so I think that he's somebody that's going to end up kind of pushing some of those veterans like Josh Adams maybe out. But also I think that the Saints may just be looking for a certain type, and maybe Josh Adams didn't necessarily fit that, and that move could have been on the way regardless of whether or not they made the signing for Sony Michel or not.
Is there another free agent running back out there that you like?
There's a couple. I mean, the New Orleans Saints have focused so much on familiarity so far this season. A reunion with Latavius Murray would certainly be really interesting. A reunion with
Murray. Play the drop. Anyway, go ahead.
No, a reunion with him would certainly be interesting. A reunion with Devontae Freeman, who I just mentioned, would certainly be interesting. But I'll tell you one guy I'm really interested in who kind of fits the same or a similar mold to Sony Michel, who was the leading rusher for the Super Bowl champion Rams last year, is Phillip Lindsay. He's somebody that can get those receptions out of the backfield. He's somebody that can, if you get really desperate, run the Wildcat. We saw that with the Denver Broncos sort of COVID outbreak a few years ago, which obviously the Saints aren't going to be looking to do. But, hey, if you need a guy in a pinch. And then, of course, he's somebody that can, run those outside zones and, has the quickness to get around the edge and sort of do the things that the New Orleans Saints really like in the run game. So he would be one I'd be pretty interested in. And then, there are a couple of other names out there like Darrell Williams of the world and things like that. But, I mean, I wouldn't rule any of the reunions, the guys they're familiar with, out. And I would imagine that those would be kind of the earlier possibilities.
He's on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. You'll give him a follow. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Saints if you're not yet. You can read yourself over at Saints Wire as well. So we got the terms of Tyron's contract now, and so we know what type of structure and how much cap space the Saints have left. What positions, we talked a little bit about running back, what positions do you think are the biggest needs still remaining in free agency?
I'd say a continued focus on the interior defensive line would certainly be one. There's not a lot of big names out there left. I mean, Akeem Hicks is out there, but, seeing Akeem Hicks come back to New Orleans.
Reunions, man. Reunions.
Yeah. I know. We're talking about familiarity. I don't know if that's necessarily familiarity that Akeem Hicks is looking for, however. That didn't end well with him. But, a focus on the interior defensive line is definitely one. At this point, you've got a couple of new signings in Kentavious Street as well as Garner-Johnson. Maybe you feel good about those guys. You've got Jordan Jackson, who you've added in the 6th round from Air Force. Then you got some undrafted guys that, of course, are familiar with the system in Shai Tuttle and Albert Huggins. And they just waived Jalen Dalton, which was a little bit of a surprise. Wouldn't be surprised to see him back before camp, though, because they really, really like him. And so as long as there's no injury, something or another there, that would make a lot of sense. But I would imagine a continued focus there. And then maybe even a continued focus at wide receiver. There's been a lot made of, the door being closed between Jarvis Landry and the Cleveland Browns. He had a visit off season with the New Orleans Saints. Certainly the Ravens and even the Indianapolis Colts should very much be interested in a guy like Jarvis Landry and his services. That would be, another position to where the Saints could still bring in 1 or 2 more players that could compete for slot snaps or, even depth to help to elevate some of the guys at the bottom of the roster. Although Marquez Callaway, Deontay Hardy, and Tre'Quan Smith, who I told you they were going to bring him back. I said it. I told you they were going to bring him back.
Hey, bro, if your only visit is to the Atlanta Falcons, maybe the most desperate receiver team in the league, your only visit, and you leave without a contract, you suck. You suck.
And I'll tell you what. Jarvis Landry also had a visit with the Atlanta Falcons, too. So they should be a team that is seen kind of in that race, too. But he's had more. He's had more visits as well. So you look at where the Saints are in terms of wide receiver, and you see the continued focus on it so far this offseason, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple of other bodies that kind of get involved there. But don't be surprised to see them comfortable with a guy like Dejon Dixon out of Nichols and see what he's able to pull off during training camp.
So that's a really good transition. What rookie undrafted free agents do you think have the biggest opportunity this weekend?
Dixon's definitely one of them. It's a little bit more crowded in that wide receiver room than maybe we're used to over the course of the past few seasons. So it does get a little bit, more challenging for him to climb up there. But some of the guys that are also kind of within, spitting distance of a position that's going to be available to them, safety Smoke Monday out of Auburn. He's already endeared himself to Saints fans wearing the Drew Brees jersey and doing what really we should all admit we've all done and yelled at the Mercedes-Benz Stadium while driving through Atlanta. So I think that, all those things kind of are going to be things that are going to put him up top when it comes to some fans. But he's really one of the most hard-hitting guys in this class, like that was in this draft class this year. And he's got really good downhill ability, downhill speed, and all those things kind of really bolster your opportunity to make the roster as a special teamer, which is really what you're looking for if you're an undrafted free agent, right? Like these late day three undrafted free agent guys, their path to the roster is usually free agency. Special teams. Right. And Abram Smith, that running back from Baylor, is another one that I would elevate there because there's probably going to be a bit of a need at running back depending upon what happens with the legal situation around Alvin Kamara, which at this point looks like it might not even, we'll see. He hasn't entered a plea. That thing hasn't moved really at all. The hearing got pushed back until August, and so there's so much there. But another piece to Abram Smith's game is that former linebacker experience, his ability to sit back, watch things develop as a running back, but then to have the wherewithal in terms of understanding how to attack those holes as a linebacker could give him a lot of special teams value in the return game as well. So those would be a couple of guys that I think would be up there along with Dejon Dixon.
Hey, man, before you go, schedule's going to be released tomorrow night. Anything you're hoping to see on that schedule?
Certainly would love to see the trip to Philadelphia because they just will not stop playing the Philadelphia Eagles in Philly. Would love to see that early in the season so that you don't have to deal with any of the weird Philadelphia weather and how that can get by the time you get to November and December. A little bit of a crapshoot in November, but December you're usually dealing with some pretty cold weather there. And then I think the other one that I'm really interested in is to see where that Bengals game lands, because that's going to be a home game for the New Orleans Saints. But the earlier in the season, the more exciting that game is just in terms of health. And then so just kind of see where that goes. And then the last one would probably be that Minnesota Vikings game. We've watched 4 teams that haven't made the playoffs one year, make the playoffs the next year for 32 straight NFL seasons. And the Saints and the Vikings were two that were right on the cusp of it last year. This year, those rosters are looking a little bit better than they were last year, so that game could already have that playoff implication. It's already exciting because it's the London game, but it could be an early one that you end up looking back on in week 14, 15, or 16 and say, if that game hadn't been won or if that game hadn't been lost, this tiebreaker conversation would be very different right now.
Give me the stat again about the playoffs.
I believe it's 4 teams over the last 32 NFL seasons that did not make the playoffs one year or were able to make it the next year. So there's always been some rotation of 4 new teams in the playoffs going back relative to the season before, and I believe it's 32 straight NFL seasons.
So you're talking about roughly a quarter of the playoffs.
Basically.
Obviously a little less than that, but
a little less, but
turning over every year, which is it's an amazing thing. So the opportunity is and should be considered there. Make sure you're subscribed up if you're not. Locked On Saints podcast, however you get your Saints, however you get your podcast. Make sure you follow him on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola and read his stuff over at Saints Wire, part of the USA Today Network. Always appreciate it, man. Thanks for the time and the info.
Brother, always a pleasure. Appreciate you having me on. Talk to you again here soon. Y'all take care and stay safe.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.